Hi guys, Squill here. A few days ago I was at the FlightSim 2016 show, which is held at RAF Cosford Museum in the UK. The annual event is billed as the world's biggest flight simulation show and is usually held on the first Saturday in October. It's a great setting in the main hangar of the RAF Cosford Museum with the vintage aircraft and engines on display. There are plenty of exhibitors too, showing off hardware and software to entice you to sacrifice your wallet to the gods of flight simulation. The atmosphere is very relaxed and friendly, and the age spectrum of flight simulator enthusiasts ranges from the very young to the very old, with some having made the trip from as far as European countries and even the United States. Now, all 1,000 advance tickets were sold out this time, which is a first for this show, and just reinforces how flight simulation is gaining in popularity. The big draw this year was the impending announcement from Laminar Research about X-Plane, which turned out to be details about X-Plane 11, including release timescale. I took my camera equipment to the show this year and recorded the whole presentation. Despite the presentation being done in a lecture room, the conditions were not ideal for recording. The presenters, Meyer, founder of Laminar Research and creator of X-Plane, and Ben Supnick, head of development for the desktop version of X-Plane, spoke about without the aid of the PA system, so the microphone pickup does sound a little distant because my camera was located at the rear of the lecture room. Also, the lights shining on the projector screen were never turned off, and so the projector's display frequency caused a little flicker on my recording as well, as you'll see. Nevertheless, the presentation was very well put together, and the future of X-Plane looks very good indeed. The new rendering and fog visuals in X-Plane 11 look fantastic, and the new UI should definitely help make the platform easier for new users to get to grips with. What follows is my recording of the entire presentation, which you can watch as it was given, or you can skip forward using the time indexes on the screen and jump to the topic that most interests you. Thanks for watching, and I'll hope to see you at FlightSim 2017.
On that, whip it up for these two guys, Laminar Research, Austin and Ben. Thank you very
much. So it was about 24 years ago, or so, 25 years ago, when I was flying Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I was a little bit frustrated by the fact that I couldn't customize the instrument panel to be just like the Piper Archer that I was getting instrument training in at the time. And I figured Microsoft probably wouldn't, adjust their simulator just for me. So I wrote my own little flight simulator called Archer 2 IFR. And I wrote myself as an instrument trainer for the Piper Archer. And I didn't know how to write a flight model back then. I was just starting to get my bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering. And I said, well, about the best way I'd come up with, that I can imagine, to do a flight model is to actually break the wing down into a bunch of little pieces and find the airflow, how it attacks each piece, and find the lift and drag and moment on each little piece of the wing. And so I did that for the Piper Archer. And then it suddenly occurred to me, just out of the blue, I was like, well, wait a minute. This is how all airplanes fly, not just the Piper Archer. And I renamed the little program I was writing to X-Plane. And that was back in my college dorm in 1993. And I very clearly remember the first time somebody said, I got a bunch of Babylon 5 episodes I caught, I've got cached away that I stole that I can show you. You get them from this thing, I don't know if you've heard of it yet. It's called the World Wide Web. And that was the first I'd ever heard that term. And that was 20 odd years ago, and then where we've come since is pretty darn fun. And we're going to start off with just a little bit of history here from X-Plane 10 that Ben will tell you, and then we're going to tag team and move from the past into the future.
Just show of hands, how many people here have flown X-Plane? It's great that we come back and we do these and there's more hands, which is fantastic. So X-Plane 10 came out in 2012. We had all new AutoGen based on OpenStreetMap. We had new global lighting. In 2013, we went 64-bit, and all of a sudden add-ons were no longer constrained to 3 gigabytes of memory. In 2014, we put in the X430 and X530, so really fantastic, realistic GPS to the level of detail where you can actually practice for your actual flights on our GPS. In 2015, we did X-Plane 10 digital download, so you can get the entire product directly over the net. Just this year, we added all new urban autogen. So the autogen got a refresh with new artwork to make the buildings look tall and the cities look good. So it's been a busy last 5 years.
But before you advance the slide, one thing Ben didn't quite show here very well in this screenshot. This is Columbus Circle. It's got to be about the most expensive real estate on the planet. X-Plane didn't know that, and so when you would fly a helicopter in Columbus Circle, there were a bunch of trailer parks around the circle here at Columbus Circle, because the AutoGen was like, well, we don't really know what to put here, but it's around kind of cul-de-sacs or trailer parks or trailer homes going around the cul-de-sac in Columbus Circle.
The picture was very carefully taken to make sure the trailer parks were not visible.
The trailer parks of Columbus Circle, where the Time Warner Center is now.
A couple years ago, we started the X-Plane Scenery Gateway, where users can create or improve airports in X-Plane using World Editor, our free scenery tool, and upload them to our server for sharing with all other X-Plane users. And the response to this has been fantastic. I made the slide, and then I got an email from Julian saying, no, we've broken 3,500. We have over 3,500 3D airports. These are airports where you land, and there's an airport with beautiful detail to see. Each time we do a new update to X-Plane, we check how many new airports are accumulated, and we've had over 500 new airports every time we do a patch. It's been amazing. Well, we keep thinking, well, this was big, but it's going to taper off, and then it doesn't. So the community has been huge in this, in working with us and making X-Plane amazing.
And these are 3D airports, and even when I fly X-Plane, I come landing in some airport that I've never been to in X-Plane before, and then there's the FBOs and the hangars and the tower and all this 3D stuff I had no hand in creating, and I'm discovering the airport for the first time, just like I would in the real world when I'm out flying to some airport I've never been to before.
The third parties have done incredible things in the last couple of years. We had the IZEG 737 come out, and it just looks beautiful. Flight Factor has done a number of airliners. That's the Pro 757 you see there. PMDG has come to X-Plane. A lot of people said when PMDG comes, I'll check it out, and they are here. You can see the very first airliner for X-Plane 10, the CRJ. And I don't know if you guys have seen the Airfoil Labs Cessna 172. It has more interaction with the airplane than anything else I've seen in terms of doing your walk around and checking it. It's an amazing experience. SkyMax Pro 3 is out, and the clouds keep looking better. The Air Cadets are using X-Plane as their trainer. You can see that's X-Plane on a 3-monitor display. Coronado has a full working G1000 in their Cessnas now. FlightSim is doing really great professional setups with multi-monitor and hardware. Reality XP just announced that the 650, 750 is coming out for X-Plane. And this is just a statistic from our analytics from our users. 50% of the flights that people take with X-Plane are taken on third-party aircraft. So people aren't just getting X-Plane, they're getting X-Plane and they're getting add-ons and they're adding to the simulator and they're making it better. So it's phenomenal to see it. So with X-Plane 10, we have an FAA certifiable simulator with a physics simulation that's accurate enough that you can make engineering decisions about your airplanes. We're 64-bit, we do hardware instancing, we do global lighting, we do HDR, and our scenery is driven by OpenStreetMap. So we've been busy for the last 5 years. So anything else you want to add?
Okay, yeah, so we're not done yet. The time has come. If you see Spinal Tap, you got to know what's coming up next, right? When you want that little extra push, you turn it up to 11. And that's what we're doing today. We're turning it up to 11. So starting today, any copy of X-Plane 10 digital download that you purchase at xplane.com, that digital download key will also work with X-Plane 11 and the entirety of the X-Plane 11 run. X-Plane 10 ran for about 5 years. X-Plane 11 will not run that long because I'm going to be picking up the pace in the future. But all purchases for X-Plane 10 digital download today apply through the entire version 11 run as well. So if anybody's thinking, I like X-Plane 11, but maybe I'll just wait till, or I like X-Plane, but I'll just wait till 11 comes out to do something, you can start enjoying your flying right now with X-Plane 10. And it's two for the price of one now, starting today. And the website, xplane.com, was just refreshed this morning, and you're going to see the new videos starting to show what X-Plane 11 is. But to really get the details on what X-Plane 11 is, you want to be right here in this room, because that's what we're about to show you.
So we're going to show you a bunch of stuff that's new for X-Plane 11. We'll talk a little bit about the user interface. We'll talk about a bunch of stuff that's happened with aircraft and some stuff that's happened with scenery. And then we will probably run out of time because there's just a ton of stuff we've done, and it's hard to pack it all into an hour.
We got 95 slides about to come.
All right, so let's start with the user interface. This is an actual photograph of X-Plane 10's user interface.
Which I love because I know exactly what each little thing does.
It's a powerful simulator and it gives you a lot of control. But we did hear this about all the time. X-Plane is hard to get into, it's confusing to set up. So we looked at this and we said, we need to do a new user interface. One that will be easier to use, one that will not scare off new users. And Austin had one very specific bit of guidance on that.
No.
He said,
don't do that.
You can't dumb it down. You can't take away the power just to make it easy to use. It still has to be a professional grade simulator with all of those options. So what we've been working on is a simulator that is simultaneously powerful with all the options, but visual so you can easily understand what you're seeing, and with the tools you need to navigate so many features and so many options. We have a small demonstration video recorded by Tyler Young, who is one of our programmers who has been working on this. So we're going to let him show you a little bit of what the new UI looks like.
Hey Cosford, I'm Tyler Young, and for the last 2.5 years, I have been working on a brand new user interface for X-Plane 11, and today I get to show it off. I'm going to start by talking about what it's like to set up a flight in X-Plane 11. We got a lot of feedback in X-Plane 10 that people liked the quick flight screen, where you set up your aircraft and your location and your weather and so on, all from one screen. And we've gotten a lot of requests to make that quick flight screen more powerful. People want to change their livery, or choose a ramp start, or have more control over the weather, and so on. And we took those requests to heart. So the X-Plane 11 flight configuration screen is really a successor to the quick flight screen. The goal here was to make the most important details about your flight available at a glance in one place, with the ability to drill down and see the details in each of those sections. So we wanted this to be the way that you edit a flight. No more having to go through the aircraft screen to pick an aircraft, or go to the location screen to pick a ramp start, and so on. Every aspect of your flight is configurable from this one place. So let's start by looking at the aircraft. You can see we have this grid view where you can scroll visually through all of your aircraft. The old folder hierarchy is gone, and instead we have these filters up top that are so much more powerful. So I can, for instance, filter by the aircraft's classification. Let's pick an airliner. Or by the number of engines, we can pick 2. Manufacturer, let's pick McDonnell Douglas. And you see we've narrowed down our potentially huge aircraft collection down to just what we were looking for. And these filters scale to thousands of aircraft, as many as you could realistically install. It'll be easy to find exactly the one you're looking for. And you just can't say that for a folder hierarchy. If we click Customize here, you can see that we can set the details of the aircraft. We've got the livery up here. You can either choose from the drop-down or just scroll through the list, and you can see exactly what that livery is going to look like on your plane. If we open the weight and balance screen, you see we've got this nice graph on the right that animates as you change your fuel weight and your load. We've got the ability to swap between metric and imperial units. I'm sure nobody in England here is excited about that. If we go back and look at the failure screen, I think this is more or less what you expect. You've got lots of different failures in lots of different categories. But if you look up at the top, you've got a search box. And like all of the tables throughout the X-Plane 11 user interface, you can search this. The fact is that no matter how well we as developers organize the failures, it's just never going to be as easy as searching because there are just so many options. So now you open the failures, you type a search like fuel, and you see all of your fuel-related failures all in one place. Now if we move on to setting the location, you can see this is very similar to the existing quick flight screen. We type in some text, maybe Atlanta, but when you click Customize, you get this visual location picker. This is an overview of the airport with all of the ramp starts, all the runway starts, all annotated on a map. So we can just zoom in on these ramp starts here and select exactly the place we'd like to start. This one's C22. Or maybe we just know that we want to go to the south of the airport, so we can drag over there and pick something there. Now with our location chosen, let's go back to the main screen and take a look at the weather. Here we can drag the slider to go through the different presets, or like location and aircraft, if we click customize, we get all the details. Here in the center pane, we have the visual weather editor, so we can click on a cloud layer and drag it around. We can raise its top or change its base. And up at the top here, we can click add cloud layer and we can drag that one around. And then the wind works the same way. You click add wind layer and you can drag the wind layer around. In the properties pane on the left, you can change its speed or its turbulence and so on. And finally, if you're using real weather, you get a preview that looks much the same. You can click on individual layers to get details about them and so on. So that's setting up the flight. Now once we start the flight, we can come back to this screen and edit the flight from the same interface. I'm going to skip ahead here so you don't have to watch X-Plane load. But you can see that as we change the weather and the time, you get the option to either apply your changes or discard them. If we click apply, you'll see that those changes take effect. Now, similar to the flight setup, these settings are now all housed in one window. No more going to 10 different windows to configure the sim initially. You just go through the different tabs in the settings. There are a few areas of this I want to highlight, and the first is the joystick. Like the rest of the UI, we've tried to make this very visual. You click on the button you want to assign to, and you choose its function. If we click edit here for this button, you can see we can search through all of the available commands. We type flaps, and there we've got flaps up set for this button. This makes it so much easier to see on the whole what's assigned to which buttons on your joystick. Now this visual assignment won't be available for all flight controls. We can't get pictures of every piece of hardware ever made, but we are planning to be able to ship with more than about 70% of users getting this nice visual experience, and we'll add more later. The other area of the settings I want to highlight is the networking. Who has not been annoyed trying to figure out IP addresses when you're trying to network the sim? This is just a perpetual pain for anyone using a network flight sim. And so in X-Plane 11, we perform as much of that configuration as we can automatically. So if I'm running X-Plane on this computer and I turn on another machine that's configured as an external visual, you'll see it's going to appear in the right side there. Boom. That machine is connected to mine now, and my machine starts sending in data, all without me touching a thing. The same goes for turning on an instructor operator station. If I watch the right here, that iOS is now connected to this machine. This works for iPhone and iPad apps as well. On the whole, networking configuration is getting a lot more hands-off in X-Plane 11. So that's all I have time for. I think you're going to find the X-Plane 11 user interface to be easy to learn, and as you get comfortable with it, much faster to configure the sim just the way you want. And that was the goal, to have a user interface that just gets out of the way and lets you fly the way you want to. I can't wait to get this in your hands in November, and I can't wait to hear your feedback. Thanks very much.
There's a peek. And what is kind of cool is all of the powerful features that I've been coding for the last 20 years. They're all there. We're not minus a single feature. All the work that I've done is simply much more accessible. Another cool little thing that happens is every copy of X-Plane in the world is sending out a little beacon across the local area network, so all the other copies of X-Plane can hear it, and that's what allows this almost automatic configuration to set up a copy of X-Plane to be an external visual or an instructor operator station. They always are talking to each other. All you have to do is approve the connection that X-Plane already wants to make.
The work we've done isn't just improvements in the look of the user interface, it's actually changes in how you work with the product. So things like network setup, it's not just it looks nicer, like we will do some of the work for you to make it faster for you to use. I've been using X-Plane for 15 years now, and I like the new UI because it's just faster to use. If I want to go type a command, I type flap, and just having the search feature, it saves me time. So it's not just good for new people getting used to it, it's also good for experienced users, because there's less you have to do before you fly, and it's faster to do the things you have to do. Just as a comparison,
this is what I wrote.
This is the weather screen we ship now, and this is the new weather screen.
All the data is still there, it's just much more nicely accessible.
Yep. If you're an instructor and you need to type numbers because you need a depth of 1,000 feet for a chart, you type it exactly in, but you can see it, and you can see exactly what's going to happen. One other thing about the user interface. The new user interface embraces multi-monitor. So the sectional map, which now floats over the UI, as well as the air traffic control window, you can pop them out and you can put them into a separate window, get them on another monitor. The X430 GPS, once you pop it out, you can pop it all the way out and you can put it on a second monitor. You can make it really big if you want. And you can now, for the first time in X-Plane 11, you can put visuals on more than one monitor. So you don't have to take one giant monitor and stretch some hugely skewed view. You actually get a setup where you say, I want a left view on this monitor, I want a center view on this monitor, I want my instructor station on this monitor, and you just say on a per monitor basis what you want, and we support it.
And what that does is it actually lets the monitors wrap around you in a circle rather than what used to be going out to infinity on a plane on either side, which is definitely different and induces distortion on the sides. That's solvable now.
All right, so that's some of the stuff we're doing in the user interface. You guys want to see some airplanes? Yeah. All right. We have some pictures of some of the new additions and the upgrades to the fleet. This is the new 737NG that Alex has been doing. The 3D cockpit looks fantastic. It's great to look around it at night. We have completely rebuilt the Cessna from the ground up. And I thought our old Cessna was pretty good. I was like, well, do we really have to do this? But Max has got an incredible detail into the Cessna. It's really a great study of the airplane. The 3D panel is also incredibly detailed. We are going to
Well, I was going to say nothing on that panel is for looks, right? This isn't something where we just like jam knobs on so it looks good. You can turn all these things and use them all because they're just built right into the core product.
That's right. This is the MD-80 and we are finally going to ship it. This has been in the works for
10 years?
Yeah, for quite a while, and it's, again, it's got a 3D cockpit that's really just full of detail. We've also done a huge upgrade on the 747. The virtual cockpit has been completely rebuilt from the ground up. The exterior of the airplane has also been updated. So that's going to be a nice improvement. We're also getting a new helicopter. We've got the S-76, again with 3D cockpit. The Cirrus jet has also gotten a major overhaul, and we're also getting a new glider, the ASC-21. So a number of new additions to the fleet. The King Air and Baron were just recently updated in X-Plane 1050, and that was the start of this long-term process of trying to get all of our aircraft up to a consistently high level of quality, where the modeling and texturing is always good, and everything you need for IFR flight is in the 3D cockpit, and it works. And the mouse clicking is always consistent, and they're always accessible by the mouse wheel for people who are flying with the mouse. So, what we've done is we've taken more of our airplanes and tried to get them up into that level of quality. Austin, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Okay. All right, so this is my bird right now. This is what I currently fly, Lance Revolution with the PT-6. And in the past, I was flying reciprocating engine airplanes, and people would email me from time to time and say, you need to work on your PT-6 model. And I never really understood what that meant. What does that mean, work on the PT-6 model? I know what a PT-6 engine is. It's a turboprop. It puts out 850 horsepower. An X-plane, it puts out 850 horsepower. That's probably good enough, right? The answer is no way. No way. Anyone in this room that's operated a PT-6 knows that you're basically sitting on top of this. It is a almost scary, constant pumping of just huge amounts of fuel and air. So an interesting thing about the PT-6 is the combustion that goes on inside the engine is much, much hotter than the exhaust gas we see here. And in fact, it's so hot that if it were to touch the walls of the engine during operation, it would destroy the engine. The engine would literally be destroyed by its own combustion process if it weren't for currents of air or insulating walls of air between the combustion and the walls of the engine. And the only way you can keep this insulating wall of air in place is to spin the compressor fast enough that you have a steady flow of air going through the engine. And because of this, it is often the case with the PT-6, when you advance the throttle, the temperature just skyrockets. It spikes way up because you're dumping in all this fuel and temperature before you've had a chance to build up the compressor RPM, to build up that insulating wall of air to then protect the engine again. And as you advance the throttle, the temperature will come up, and then as the compressor speeds up, the temperature will come down. And the effect is so pronounced that it is very common to cruise this airplane at a lower temperature than it idles. It idles at a higher temperature than it cruises because that insulating wall of air hasn't been built up yet. Another fascinating thing about the PT-6 is there's no connection between the compressor and the propeller. What happens is the air comes into here, goes through a compressor, gets pressurized and heated up, and then it just races forward to try and escape from all that pressure, and it runs through a little windmill that's like right about here. And that little windmill is then hooked up to the propeller. So there's no connection between the compressor here and the windmill or the turbine up here. And so the compressor's doing one thing, the prop is doing something else from an RPM standpoint. There's no connection but air. Another little interesting thing is that when you adjust the throttle at low power settings, it takes a while for the compressor to respond. The compressor spins at like 100,000 RPM back here. When it's not spinning very fast, you adjust the throttle, you're just dumping in this fuel, watching the temperature spike, and the compressor is slow to spin up. But once you've got some good power on, that dynamic pressure and airflow becomes so huge that the mass of the turbine becomes negligible by comparison, and it responds quickly as you can move the throttle. So it's almost like an old steam engine in a way, where you're constantly balancing, the steam engine, you're constantly balancing the water and how much coal you're shoveling in, and you don't want to over-temp the boiler, but you want to get everything you can out of the steam engine. This, to me, feels a lot like that. You're always balancing, how much fuel can I put in here? Do I have enough airflow to allow in the extra fuel? And if you understand how that works, you can operate a PT6 engine for 2,000 hours without a problem. And if you don't, you can destroy it the very first time you start it. So it's a really finicky, interesting engine. It's a constant, fun little game to operate it properly. I recorded a lot of performance in my airplane, got it dialed into X-Plane just right, and so now X-Plane really has a good PT6 model, and that affects the King Airs, Avantis, TVMs, Pilatuses. A lot of airplanes have PT6 engines, and that modeling now is really good. And once I got that modeling done, the first time I flew in an X-Plane, I actually felt like I was operating a PT6. It's an almost organic experience because of these constantly changing airflows and temperatures and fuel flows. So we got a really good PT6 model. Another thing we've got is a new pressurization system model. So the way pressurization works is the compressor back here that pressurizes the air for the engine also has a tiny little bleed air pipe that goes through an intercooler to cool it down as is necessary, and then into the cabin to pressurize the cabin. And an interesting thing about airplanes is they always leak air a little bit. And so if you bring the throttle all the way back to idle, at least in this airplane, lots of other airplanes like it, if you bring that throttle back to idle at 28,000 feet, you will not hold cabin pressure. Your cabin pressure will start to climb, the air is escaping the cabin, and eventually you get to the point that you literally don't have enough air in the cabin to breathe anymore. And so you have to add power to spin up the compressor, to pressurize the air to get back into the cockpit. And so in X-Plane now, all of this is simulated. So when you're doing a descent, if you were flying an airplane, say like this in X-Plane, you get the power back, that cabin altitude is going to start to climb, and you're going to have to bring that throttle back in possibly to hold that compressor, RPM up enough to hold pressure in the cabin. And that is absolutely part of flying a pressurized airplane, making sure that you've got the pressurization system. And if it's an engine-driven system, then maybe you cannot descend at idle at high altitudes. We've got hydraulic system modeling improvements as well. This has a hydraulic system to operate the landing gear, so I've become pretty well versed in that, and so that's simulated. Stalling under ice. Okay, this is something I don't know from personal experience, but I know someone that does. He was flying a TVM 850 with a little bit of ice on the wings, not much, and he decided to go ahead and stall the airplane and go to minimum controllable airspeed to see how it handled. And he was shocked that his airplane stalled at a much lower angle of attack than he was possibly expecting. Normally an airplane can get that nose up about 20 degrees before it finally drops wing and stalls. He had that thing stalling at like 7 or 8 degrees. I mean, he just had that nose up a little bit, and then he just suddenly lost lift in the left wing and just dropped. He had the whole thing on a GoPro camera. It's pretty scary to watch. And so the interesting thing is, when you talk to the FAA about icing, they always say the same thing. They say, oh, well, when ice gets on your airplane gets heavier from the weight of the ice. It's got more drag because your airfoils are no longer optimized, and it has less lift because your airfoils are no longer optimized. That's what the FAA says. And so through X-Plane 10, that's how I modeled ice, according to what the FAA said. Turns out, that is not the scary thing about ice. We can always handle a little more weight, a little more drag, a little less lift. What's going to surprise you is when you raise the nose to an attitude that you think is perfectly normal, and then it stalls on you when you don't expect it, and it drops. That is now simulated with X-Plane 11. We actually bring down that stalling angle of attack as ice builds on the aircraft. So this is a level of ice modeling that's going to be critical, I think, for safety when it comes to training for real pilots. As well, with real airfoils, as they go to progressively higher angles of attack, the controls become less sensitive. For the flight controls, the ailerons, elevators, and rudders, they do less. They do less at high angles of attack because they're no longer operating in the airflow they're designed to operate in. Now, X-Plane has historically not simulated that. It does starting with X-Plane 11. And so now with X-Plane 11, we have a model where the ice builds up on the airplane, the weight comes up, the drag comes up, the lift comes down, the stalling angle of attack goes down, so it will stall sooner than you think it will, and then the flight control will be degraded at the high angle of attack, and of course the flight control authority is what you need to recover. And so you're in a situation where once that nose stalls at say 5 or 6 degrees angle of attack, you've got to lower the nose, don't expect to have a lot of control authority, and never let the airplane get up to that high angle of attack again unless you've gotten ice off the airplane. So it's a new icing model as well. Improved manifold pressure model. Okay, so right before I saw my last airplane, the reciprocating engine airplane, I did one last bit of data collection off of that airplane to get manifold pressures and RPMs and all that kind of stuff where it needs to be. And so I've dialed in the reciprocating engine aircraft model as well. And then I've done kind of just cool, fun little stuff. Like when you hit the primer, X-Plane 11 now tracks how much fuel you primed the engine with. So when you start it, it will run at a higher speed for a few seconds while it goes through the fuel that's built up in the cylinders during prime. And so you will actually have an X-Plane 11 if you over-prime it and then you hit the starters, go deet, 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 boom, and it just race up to life as that fuel is burned out of the cylinders. But if you don't prime it and you can still get it started, you engage the starter, it'll just kind of smoothly go up to running and you can barely even tell it ever actually started. And when you quit running on the starter and started running on the combustion. And that's exactly the way the Columbia 400 really is. When you start it hot, you can barely even tell that it's running because you don't prime it. So there's none of that racing to life. So just the last little bit of detail in reciprocating engine models has been improved as well. So basically the engine models are hugely overhauled for X-Plane 11 and they really feel like the engines in the real airplanes.
So all of this stuff adds detail and depth to the simulation of small aircraft and medium aircraft. What we're going to show you now is some changes to the avionics. Philip Menzel did the X430 for us, and we've got a video of him talking about some of the new work he's done.
Hello Cosford, I'm Philip Menzel. I'm a software developer and flight instructor on the X-Plane team. You know me for bringing this little gadget to you in X-Plane 1030, which you make even more useful in X-Plane 11 by making it freely resizable. And you can see some new UI elements on the top that pop up when you mouse over. For example, you can now pop out the window and move it any way you want, drag it over to your second monitor, however you want to set up your cockpit, resize it to whatever you need on your external monitor, or simply close the pop-up, bring it back into X-Plane, and with a simple click in the middle of the title bar, bring it back to its default size. Then we added a couple new features that are really useful. For example, let me enter another airport here. We are going to the Frankfurt International Airport, which I would normally not do in a Cessna 172 since the landing fee is currently about 400 euros if I recall correctly. But landings are free in X-Plane, so we can just set up a flight to Frankfurt in X-Plane. And a new feature of the GPS in X-Plane 11 is that it allows you to select departure procedures and arrival procedures. For example, here I'm choosing the Galaxy 4 Papa departure in Karlsruhe Baden-Baden Airport, which is simply inserted into the flight plan. Then I can do the same for arrivals. For example, loading the Spessart 25 South arrival into Frankfurt. Just select it here, then select the runway we are going to, 25 left, and with range buttons I can preview what the procedure will look like, and with the load button simply insert it into our flight plan, and then we can go flying. The next cool feature is the X-Plane 11 default FMS, which you can drop into any airplane. The interface follows the same principles as the GPS, so you can resize it, pop it out to a window, drag it over to a second monitor, and set up your cockpit in any way you like. As you can see here, the FMS draws from a global, easily updated database that we have greatly improved for X-Plane 11, because we now rely on industry standards such as XIM and ARINC 424, which allow professionals to use industry tools to create and prototype procedures in X-Plane, including RNP approaches with radius to fixed segments. To make a flight plan, simply click into the scratchpad for your keyboard, and then you can type in the airports, and then you can insert individual waypoints, or you can enter airway segments. Airways can be entered either by name and exit waypoint, or you can do airway entries, and the FMS will figure out the intersections for you. Over on the procedure side, you can of course select departure and arrival procedures for airports, and then Choose from the vast approach database that includes ILS, VOR, DME, NDB, RNF, GPS, RNP, and GLS approaches, which now also use path points for angular vertical guidance, which is something that no other desktop flight simulator has ever done. You can see here the VPA for the final approach segment. Here you can look at information about the final approach segment, whether the vertical guidance is barometric or LPV, and what kind of satellite augmentation is used, which of course would be EGNOS in the EU, instead of WAS, what you see here. That's a bug. The direct intercept function is super useful for online flying, and there's also a nearest airport function that you can filter by runway length and find the next suitable airport for a diversion. For VNAV, you enter the cruise altitude, and from there we construct a smooth path of constant descent angle that then tells you when to start your descent and what rate you must use. This is a generic function that works without performance data of a specific aircraft. Instead, you can simply enter a different vertical path angle, and the FMS will update the descent instructions accordingly. For online flying, the vertical direct-to function is also super useful. You click direct intercept, and then you simply dial the altitude into the autopilot, which is then copied into the FMS, and then you click on the right side of a waypoint to go there at the desired altitude. Another cool function is the pilot waypoint functionality, which allows you to create pilot-defined waypoints either by latitude, longitude entry, or by place-bearing distance or place-bearing entry to define a location. And then you can give this point a name and store it. From then on, it is available not only in the FMS, but also in all the GPSs of all planes and X-plane. There's a couple more functions in the FMS that would take too long to describe here, so I just want you to try them out yourself when we release X-Plane 11, and I wish you a lot of fun with the rest of the presentation. See you.
So it's some pretty darn detailed FMSs, both the airliner standard and the Garmin 430 as well. And obviously Philip has a slightly different interpretation of aviation than I do. Right? For me, it's all about managing the airplane and the energy and the fuel and the temperatures and the pressures and the flight modeling. And for Philip, of course, it's all about the FMSs and the planning and perfectly following the existing route. But with X-Plane 11, we get in both.
So you've seen a bunch of stuff we're doing with the airplanes. We're going to show you some scenery things too, and we'll start with the autogen. So this is X-Plane 10 autogen, and there are two things to note about it. The first thing is that it's really twisty. This is the OpenStreetMap data that was used. You can see that we do autogen no matter how strange the road grid is, not a problem. The other thing to note about it is that it's really US-centric. Everything is ranch houses and green lawns and lots of open space, and everything looks like America. So in X-Plane 11, we are adding a European autogen theme. Got a couple pictures of the work in progress by the artist here. You can see that the buildings, the road grid, and the architecture has all been redone to make things look appropriate for Europe. If you look up at close-up, there's all that detail you'd expect, but the cars and the street signs start to look a little bit more like home. Here's a side-by-side so you can see the change right down. This is the tile boundary right down the middle. And on the left, you can see the roads and the OSM data being done with US styles, and then on the right with European style.
So this is in the middle of Iceland here? They switched from US to Europe halfway?
This was made by intentionally making a little bit of old V10 scenery in V11. Here's the close-up, and you can see exactly how the cutover happens. This is a work in progress. If I can just show you a little bit of how our autogen works. Our autogen isn't just tiles, it has to fit within OpenStreetMap. If in real life there's a crazy shaped road, we have to somehow get buildings that fit. And I brought a prop to show you how we do it. It's a high-tech prop. The way the autogen works is that each individual building is a tile, but they are all connected at certain points. So they can form...
Let me see all the different colors all the time.
Oh yeah, oh, that's much better. So whatever shape OpenStreetMap gives, we shape our autogen to it. So this was Peter Bednar is the artist who's been doing this. He's in the Czech Republic and he's making fantastic European stuff. And you can see him working on these downtown buildings, and he's color-coded some of the buildings so we can see which piece he's working on as it shapes itself differently to each piece of the road grid. This is a top view, and you can see that there's no pattern here. This is whatever happened in real life, and then we shape our origin around it. So just one or two examples. This is Innsbruck in OpenStreetMap. This is the raw data we start with to make an autogen city. This next picture is Google Earth. I couldn't find an aerial photo, but Google Earth is a approximation of what it looks like in real life. And here's what it looks like in X-Plane 11, now that we've got European-style autogen coming in. And you start to see the right colors and tones to the city compared to what we used to have. I did try a RAF Cosford just to see what would happen. This is what Cosford looks like in OpenStreetMap. I could not find an aerial photo. Google Earth is just orthophotos. And here's how it comes out in X-Plane. So X-Plane attempts to get the road grid in where it belongs in both places.
And what's so cool is these road maps are worldwide. And since we wrote, Ben wrote, the algorithm to actually populate all these roads with building, there's a whole planet of this scenery out here that literally we haven't even seen yet. When somebody gets X-Plane 11, they fly it, they may be the first person, there will be the first person to see some of the scenery that we create.
Now, one thing you may have noticed is that the scenery looks a little bit German. There's a wide variety of architectural styles in Europe. It's a very diverse continent. And we had to start somewhere. We had to pick something to be the first style. And so we picked a sort of a intermediate German style as the first thing we do to get a European theme that didn't look like the US. But you might not be thrilled with that. You might not like having Germany have an undue influence over what things are like in the United Kingdom. You might think that this isn't a good relationship. And if a lot of you thought that, you might discuss amongst yourself, and maybe you'd have some kind of vote and say, maybe this German thing isn't for us, we're going to go do our own thing.
You can do that.
This is possible in real life, and it is possible in X-Plane too. Because our autogen system doesn't just allow differentiating Europe from the United States, you can divide the regions as much as you want, and you can get as specific and as detailed as you want. Now, we started with autogen in X-Plane 10, we did an upgrade in 1050, we've done an upgrade for 11, and we're going to do more. We're going to keep adding to this. But the world is a very diverse place, and one thing that X-Plane allows is third parties can add their own autogen. You can add more variety, you can add higher quality, or you can just change the style. So this is an area where I think third parties can contribute. Just like we need our airplanes to look really nice, but we also need people to make airplanes besides us, because there's a lot of airplanes out there. Autogen is the same way. So this is an area where I think third parties could also contribute and make the autogen system even better. Let's talk a little bit about airports and kind of what's happening with Lego brick airports.
Okay, so in addition to the flight modeling stuff I've been doing, I wanted to help make the airports look more realistic. Now with World Editor, as we have already gone over, there's like 3,500 three-dimensional airports out there. But what this three-dimensional airports means is people build all the terminals and the ramps and the pavement, the towers and the hangars and whatnot. But that sure is static. It's too static. I don't want you to see the same thing every time. I don't want it to be still. So, we got a library of these airplanes, lots and lots of them, made by the artist. And I wrote a little algorithm to randomly plot down these aircraft into various different gates. And as you fly away and come back, it'll be different each time you go there. So every time you go to a landing, you won't see the same thing. The airplanes will be randomly situated. Well, not entirely randomly. The airlines are grouped by gates. You'll see all the US Air in one place, or the Delta or the American in another, and so on with European airlines. But within the aircraft appropriate type and operator, they'll be randomized to the gates. You never see quite the same thing twice. Then the next thing I did is I took all of our little trucks and push carts and food trucks and all that kind of stuff, and I coded them to swarm around the airplane to service the airplane. And so what we did is each airplane, you set in PlaneMaker, we designed the airplanes. You said, hey, I want the food cart here, the crew car here, I want to be fueled at this location, I want the push cart to grab me here on the nose here. And so each airplane basically broadcast a request to all of the vehicles in the X-Plane world. And when the vehicles hear the request, oh, this guy needs fuel, oh, this guy wants food, they come running using a very simplified little driving model. They come running to deliver that service with their tiny little brains. And so what's cool about it is, it's not just like the trucks come in at a 90-degree angle, deliver food, and then back out. No, that would just be boring after the second or third time you saw it. Instead, the cars actually can be parked at goodness knows where on the airport. The airplane where you parked it is goodness knows where on the airport, but when you summon service or demand service, they all come swarming up to get it to you from wherever the heck it is they are, and they try, sometimes unsuccessfully, but they try to avoid crashing into you and themselves while doing it. But the advantage is you never see the same thing twice. And so here we got a little time lapse here. I want service, give me fuel, now food. That's Austin's vegan food there, by the way.
We should have gotten the
And then I want fuel, now push me back once you fueled me up. And there we go. And then we got a physically realistic pushback as well. And that pushback is actually applying forces on the airplane. And you can actually see the airplane kind of do like this as the truck pushes you. Oh, so here's something that was funny. The airplanes in X-Plane have been coded for some time to crash if the accelerations on them are too large. And recently for X-Plane 10, we built exploded airplane geometry where airplanes are like charred and burning and smoking and flaming. And the pushback trucks at first were a little too rough. They like grabbed the nose wheel too quickly. And I started a little artificially intelligent, run like you just saw, and then I went out for a walk or a jog or something. And I came back to see what was happening. And the push truck was just dragging this flaming wreckage of an airplane forlornly across the ramp. It looked like a zombie dragging a corpse in a movie. And the push truck was just kind of going, dragging this flaming wreckage across the airport. It's like, what? How did that happen? And what it was the push car just jammed onto the nose gear too hard when it locked on. The acceleration shook the airplane and caused it to go into crash mode and exploded the airplane. But the push car, I never coded the push car to know that it had destroyed the airplane when it hooked up to it. So it's just dragging the carcass across the pavement. But so anyway, this is the kind of fun little coincidence you get when you do things based on physical code rather than just some sort of an easy little imitation that's easy to just put in the sim and shove out the door. Instead, we base everything on physics. It's just so much more fun that way.
So, Austin has the simulation running for the trucks, but how do the trucks know where to go in an airport? The answer is World Editor, our scenery creation tool. People are already using this to place the terminals, to place the taxi routes that the aircraft drive on, to place the line markings and the lights. For X-Plane 11, we've augmented it to let authors specify where the trucks are allowed to drive, the actual marked routes, as well as the parking spots where the trucks are born and where they can go back to, and even points of interest, little pit stops that the trucks can go to. So a fuel truck can go off to a fuel farm and get fuel and come back. So we've been working on this as we work on this feature. So we should have this available in beta for everyone by the time X-Plane 11 is available, so people can start adding this kind of dynamism to their local airport as well. So that's some of the new airport features we've done. And I'll talk to you a little bit about lighting and fog, because we are redoing the lighting model for X-Plane 11. When we have a major version, this is our chance to sort of raise the level of realism we go for. So I talked about this a little bit in Hartford. For X-Plane 11, we are going to physically based rendering, which basically means we try to use the laws of physics for the rendering. In the past, we didn't have big enough GPUs to do this. In the past, computer graphics or whatever you could get away with. But now we have more power, we can start to do things right. So 3 things need to happen to really do rendering right. The first one is that everything is reflective, not just the things that you think of as shiny. In old rendering models, if something is glossy, it's reflective. But in real life, there are surfaces that are highly reflective, and yet they are rough. So it's not a mirror, you can't comb your hair in it, but a lot of light comes off of it. Sand is like this. It's really reflective, it's not shiny, but it makes it bright. And when you're flying high up in an airplane, you can really see the beaches because they're reflective. So those things have to be separated. We need to change reflectivity with view angle, just like happens in real life. So watch the underside of the Cessna wing as I move the camera. It's reflecting. And the reason it's reflective is because you're looking at it at the grazing angle. It's the same material as the side of the fuselage, but the side of the fuselage doesn't look reflective because you're looking at it straight on. You go around to the nose, that side becomes more reflective. This has to be dynamic. It has to be done in the engine and respond to camera angle. And the final thing is energy conservation. Things that are shinier or glossier don't actually make more light. They just focus the light more intensely at you. And things that are reflective but rough scatter the light around. So once you get energy conservation right, everything in your scene looks like it's at the right level of brightness. So we are adopting a physically based rendering model that does this. In our new model, roughness versus glossiness and reflectivity are separate. So this is the test rig I use. These balls are attached to a Cessna so you can fly them around. But down here you can see a test material that's very reflective and very glossy, so it's like a mirror. And then as it gets rougher, you start to get a more messed up reflection. And so you can get these rough surfaces too. And then as you go this way, they become less reflective and more diffuse, and you start to see the paint color. So this is our new lighting model. These properties are separate, and authors get control of both of them. We talked about this in Hartford, and the third-party developers started asking questions about what was going to happen. They want to know, what kind of physically based rendering are you using? Because physically based rendering has become the game industry standard for a lighting model. So the answer is, we're using a workflow called metalness. We're not the only ones doing this. Metalness is a workflow where you control roughness versus glossiness, you control reflectivity, and you get to tint the reflections a little bit. And this is done so that certain metals like iron or gold can look right. So this is we're not the only ones doing this. This is actually a very standard thing, which means that a lot of the art tools for physically based rendering will work with X-Plane. So I will show you a couple comparisons. I took a ton of pictures on my flight over as I was leaving. So, you know, some of these are from my iPhone and some of these are from X-Plane. So here's a real-life picture of an American 737 departing out of Boston on a sunny day. And I noticed it because we have this airplane with this livery coming to X-Plane. And this is what it looks like in X-Plane in just about the same shot. And we're starting to reach a point where the artist can create the lighting effects that you would get in real life with the right amounts of reflection. It used to be that you had to paint this. And you could paint this and it would be right for one camera angle. But with the new lighting model, when the sky changes or the camera moves, it keeps looking real. Here's another show and tell from the trip. In real life, there are huge differences in the amount of brightness in the world. And we don't really notice because our eyes are awesome. And they just adjust so fast to huge differences in light level. So when I was in the parking garage, I could see a blue sky, and I could see all the people. And then when I took a picture with my iPhone, the sky comes out completely white. And if I had adjusted for the sky to look good, then the people would have just been dark silhouettes. Unfortunately, your LCD monitor is not really awesome. It kind of stinks. It has a very small amount of dynamic range. And so the problem we have is how do you get this level of light difference into a simulator? And this problem has been made harder with X-Plane 11 because the lighting is more realistic and more accurate. And so we tend to get more of these scenes with huge differences in brightness. So we're taking advantage of something we did in X-Plane 10, which is using HDR. And we have to map the light levels down to your monitor because the first thing we get is these real-world light levels that are very out of range. So we actually use tone mapping all the time in X-Plane 11 to cope with this. The new lighting model lets us do glass surfaces more nicely than we used to. It used to be you would just paint a reflection onto your airplane. But that reflection can now not only be dynamic, if you watch the front windscreen, it is also a function of view angle. So as the windscreen gets to be on the side, you start to get a stronger reflection, and when you look at it straight on, it's nice and clear. So you can have materials that work like the real-world materials from any view angle. This is sort of the big question. What about all of the existing textures that we've made for X-Plane? What about those great third-party add-ons? X-Plane 11 will attempt to map your existing textures to the new lighting model, and we have this problem too because we have, you know, tons of textures for scenery and for airplanes, and we don't have time to go and adjust every one of our textures. This is a static aircraft from X-Plane 10's static aircraft library, as rendered in X-Plane 10. And here's the exact same scene with the X-Plane 11 lighting model. So in our experience, even taking the existing planes and putting them in the new lighting model, generally looks pretty good and works out pretty good. So we're hoping that this will be a reasonably smooth transition for everybody. This was the other question the third parties asked was, how detailed are the reflections? What will I be able to see? And, maybe,
That's the goal.
We'd like you to see everything, but maybe not much. There's going to be a rendering setting to let you tune up and down the detail. But there's no question that having more detailed reflections will consume frame rate. And there will be some options that have less detail, that are faster. The good news is the reflection doesn't have to be amazing to make the lighting look amazing. And here's why. As we talked about from the parking garage, the ground is actually really pretty dark. You don't notice because your eyes are good, but stuff on the ground is just not that bright. The sky is actually much, much brighter. It comes out white in the picture. The sky is brighter than the ground. And the sun, it's in its own universe. It's much, much brighter than everything. So what this means is, as long as we have a reflection where the ground is pretty dark, the sky is much brighter, and the sun is brighter still, you're going to get a very plausible reflection that kind of looks like what you expect from an airplane, which is sky tone on the top of it, darkness coming around the bottom, and some real glare coming off the sun. So the new light model is going to run all the time for everybody in X-Plane 11. You'll be able to turn the quality of the reflections down, but I think you're still going to get some pretty good lighting effects even when you do that. So that is the new lighting model. I'll also talk a little bit about fog, because we've also changed the fog and atmospheric scattering model. Fog is more than just fog. Fog in X-Plane is anything that happens to the light between the thing you're looking at and your eyes. Because that's what fog is that there's stuff in the air between what you're looking at and you, and the image gets degraded. So we've redone the mathematics of the fog model. It's now exponential, it's radial, it's in linear space. The math isn't important. What matters is that when you see it, it looks much more real. It looks more right. Your brain will know what the right fog curves are. So I've got another pair of pictures for my flight to demonstrate why this matters. This is taken off out of Boston, about 500 feet. And as you can see the autogen, or houses, as the normal people call them. You can see them really easily, right? It's very clear. It's a beautiful picture. This is probably about 5,000 or 6,000 feet. It's only about 5 minutes later in the flight. The weather hasn't changed. And it's just this big, mungy blue mass, right? I mean, this is like a bright, vibrant green. All the colors are gone. You can barely see a lot of the detail. What's changed is just how much air is between us and the ground. So that's why fog matters, not just for IFR. So here we are in Seattle. This is X-Plane 10. And with the new model, that's what it looks like in X-Plane 11. It's a subtle change because this is a clear day. But if you go back, everything's maybe a little too vivid. It's a little too green, almost a little bit like computer graphics. When we start to get some of those atmospheric effects, you get much more a sense of space and distance and depth. I took this picture as I was parking my car, and as you can see, the city of Boston is a little bit washed out. This was a sunny day. It wasn't humid or muggy. It wasn't like the thick air, and yet Boston, just a couple miles away, it was hard to make out the details. And this is the same shot in X-Plane 11, and you can see we get the same thing with the new fog model. The color and tone of the buildings is clearly there, but they've kind of been washed out because the air is there. And if you fly to them, as you get closer, they will pop into view as expected. This is a sequence of decreasing visibility on short final in Seattle. This is at 3 miles of visibility, 2 miles visibility, 1.5, RVR 6,000, and RVR 3,000. So you can see that fog kind of creeping in and everything disappearing into the fog. It makes a nice effect for IFR and low-vis flying. Just for comparison, this is what we have now in X-Plane 10. 3, 2 miles, 1 mile, 6,000, 3,500. You can tell that the fog isn't doing what it's supposed to. It's like a curtain coming in. Whereas with the new fog model, it's much softer, and things you can almost make them out in the fog, but not quite. I think that's going to make a nice flying experience. Here's another fog series. This is a sort of a marginal day. The autogen, as we go up in altitude, and you'll start to see that the autogen starts to lose definition as more air is between you and the autogen. So we start to get those effects of being up in the air. The same thing goes, by the way, for bringing the visibility out. So if we increase the visibility, you can start to see Mount Rainier coming in the background, right? And it'll become more and more crisp as you increase the visibility.
Wow, that was beautiful. Go back to that again.
1 second here.
That's incredible.
Oops. Right, so as it comes out, maybe you can just barely see it, and there it is, right?
Wow.
Yeah, and as you fly, this is happening continuously, which is nice. One other thing that we're putting into the light engine is ambient occlusion, and this is one of those things that if you don't have it, you might not know you need it, but once you have it, you're not going to want to get rid of it. So watch the wheels of the baggage train. When we turn on ambient occlusion, everything gets darker where it should be darker, in the murky places. If we go back to how it used to be, you know, the shadow's there, but it still doesn't really look like it's on the ground. Ambient occlusion brings in darkness in areas that are really underexposed to the sky, underneath the trucks. And so you can see that that's the area where the scene's been made darker and it makes it more realistic. This is a great fit for our Lego brick airports because authors are bringing in all this ground equipment and it naturally develops these dark underbellies. In custom scenery, you could do this by putting it in the texture, but this works on your GPU and so it works everywhere. So just add a little bit more realism to Lego brick airports. So those are some of the changes in the light and the fog. We've already done at least an hour here. And there's still more stuff that's going into X-Plane 11. FMON sound. We are bringing in FMON, which is a sound engine, to be the sound engine of X-Plane 11. And it's phenomenal. It has really great capabilities in the engine for stereo, for differing sounds as you go around the plane. It has a great authoring environment for people to really make nice sound. It's very friendly to audio engineers. And it's going to be open to third parties. So we have this in our new Cessna, and we're going to start using it on more and more of our aircraft. But third parties will also be able to use this. And this is something where if you're making a third-party aircraft, maybe you weren't going to go and license FMON just for yourself, but it's going to be available to third parties as part of X-Plane, which is going to be a huge improvement. Chris demoed this at the Hartford convention. The YouTube video doesn't really do justice to the sound. You kind of have to hear it in person or have headphones on. We are also making our new particle system available. As part of X-Plane, it's available to third parties. You can create custom effects. You can really start to tweak the smoke and fire, and some of these things that were built in are now third-party accessible. The weapon system has also had an overhaul, and it gives you much more control. It's got more accuracy. You can model the effects with the particle system yourself. So a whole bunch of X-Plane has really been revised and gone over.
The answer is this year. We'll have it out by the end of the year.
This is the year we're going to do X-Plane 11. And if you want to look at X-Plane 11, you can get a product key now for X-Plane 10 that will also unlock X-Plane 11. So especially if you don't have X-Plane 10, you don't need to wait. You can get this key now, and as soon as it is publicly available, you will be able to use it. So that's on our website as of this morning.
Yep, you just go to xplane.com, you get the digital download key.
All right. That's what we've got for X-Plane 11.